So in this little taster for Garden Masterclass material online, we're going to look at maintenance, which is a singularly unsexy subject. A lot of people in the garden business don't really want to talk about it. Remember having been in various public events with various well-known designers, and they do a presentation and everyone goes, wow, isn't it wonderful? And it's questions and somebody gets up and says, what about maintenance? And you can kind of see very often the speaker just go, ooh. But maintenance is, of course, really important. And I think it's particularly important, but also creative when we turn to naturalistic and ecological planting design. I remember a Swedish professor of some fame, now retired, Roland Gustafsson, saying to me a very long time ago that maintenance is half of design. That there's a world of difference between the traditional garden, where maintenance was about basically keeping it looking the same through a series of repetitive tasks, and more ecological design, where there is constant to and fro between the plants. There's a dynamism there. And maintenance is actually creative. Do you let this thing seed this year? Do you limit the growth of that plant? Do you try to create space for less vigorous species? So decisions made today may have implications many years down the line. Anyway, in this taste, we're going to start off with that traditional maintenance, but of a wonderfully high standard. Ben Pope is a head gardener at a large private garden in Sussex, in southern England, in talking about the potential of gardens in particular seasons and then what to do. And he's done a series of 4 webinars with us, spring, summer, autumn, winter. And we're going to look now at excerpts from spring and winter, where he's taking us through these more traditional but often very essential maintenance tasks, looking at things like pruning and seed sowing. So over to Ben Pope.
Like loo rolls or the little Hessian, the kind of cramped sort of disc you can get and you can sow straight into. But we use these, which are root trainers. They're fantastic. Again, much like the tray, overfilling. And these you have to really give a bit of tamp down because they've got a lot more corners than that. So you'll see.
But this is the sort of thing, and what you were seeing just then is early spring sowing, and we will continue that right the way through spring. We'll also be sowing direct into the soil beds in the greenhouse in early spring. So just down there, we'll be starting off with some salads. We'd have just taken out last winter's mustards and all sorts of things, so we'll be replacing that with new ones. We'll probably do radish, things like that in the greenhouse to start off with, and also some herbs as well, because fresh herbs are really, really useful. Got peas going in from root trainers, early peas to get them started. You can see the bottom picture, that's poppies in those root trainers that we would have direct sown. And then in the right, that's in the borders. So that's the poppies much later, now flowering. So we'll be planting those poppies out, say now, or maybe in another couple of weeks. And then of course, late spring, early summer, when you get a slight shift from late spring perennials to early summer, the poppies are flowering really nicely. And it gives that kind of idea of self-seeding. But of course, because we've mulched, we've actually stopped a lot of the self-seeding and do them, and they're a bit more flexible because nothing changes too quickly from week to week. But actually, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of tidying up to do from the season before, and then a lot of preparation to do for the season. And one of the things, obviously, is clearing borders. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a sec. The other one is pruning roses and shrubs, trees, if you're doing those, and then of course taming fruit, pruning those as well.
And then from that, you simply secure it with a wreath knot. So that's almost like a figure of 8. And the magic thing about those knots is they're very simple, and the more you pull, the tighter they get, so they're not going to come undone. And just to finish off, you simply pull both ends, nice and short, and there we go.
Be realistic, depending on where you live in the country and your last frost date. So, yes. But as well as that, what else is happening then? So we start all our onions and garlics off. These are our spring onions and garlic. So our autumn ones are already sitting outside. And we're doing both because A, the family love to cook with onions and garlic, so we can never grow enough. And B, it's nice to stagger it. By staggering the cropping, we're staggering the storage potential, and we're kind of just extending the season.
So more naturalistic or ecological planting design accepts that we have a dynamic plant community, and that maintenance is really as much about creative editing and thinking into the future, as it is about, well, more than it is about keeping things looking the same. But of course, the fundamentals are to get the plant mix right. And that's what Cassian Schmidt addresses in another webinar we've done, which is looking in some detail at the relationships between the productivity, the fertility of an environment, which of course supports very strong growing competitive plants, and stressful environments where you have potentially a more diverse, slower growing flora. And so recognizing the ecology of the site, choosing the appropriate plants has a really big impact on maintenance further down the line.
The fundamental approach is matching plants to their habitats. Of course, this should be very, well, it sounds very simple, but still there are some mistakes made. And in the case of maintenance today, it's quite interesting to look what kind of things and habitats and other things would influence the amount of maintenance. Also for private garden, I think it's interesting to know where are the low maintenance habitats and where are the higher maintenance processes you apply in these highly stylized borders or gardens. Well, of course, visually very, very effective, but a lot of work. And of course, water. This needs resources all the time. But also, there is a connection between the pattern of a planting and maintenance. And I will show you some possible patterns. You probably know some are maybe new to you or more naturalistic. Some are more stylized, some are more, and a lot of things can be done with machinery, at least if you have larger spaces. We will see that a little bit closer. And the interesting thing is this whole idea to match the maintenance.
And we're going to end up with a fascinating recording we made some time ago. It's actually in the first year of COVID, which is available to members of Garden Masterclass, which is initially what was one of the public service broadcasts we did. Dan Pearson, well-known British garden designer, talking with Midori Shintani, who is the head gardener at Tokachi Millennium Forest in Hokkaido in northern Japan. Every year, Dan goes over and they talk about how the garden is developing. So there's a few little discussions here about the changes they're making in the garden in the light of Dan's annual consultancy visit.
It's a deliberate contrast, isn't it, to the mingled planting to either side. And there are some moves throughout the garden like this, and the Calamagrostis hedges that allow us some contrast between the mingled plants and that sort of gentleness of the mingle, and then the monoculture of other things. So the monocultures are telling us very quickly, aren't they?
You know, the divided vegetation, like a deeper native one, that's going to be for the bears. We're going to keep the bears. And then in the forest garden, instead of that, we extend the new vegetation for our visitors every spring. But this year, the bears has a lot of, like kind of the family around our forest, and the one bear.
So there we are. So 3 of those were available as webinars, which anyone can access through the Garden Masterclass website. And the Tokachi was a recording which you can only Garden Masterclass members can access. Garden Masterclass members can get discounts on the pay-to-view webinars, as well as see lots of stuff that other people can't. We've got hundreds of hours of material online. We are very proud of the material we've built up, documenting gardens and gardeners all over the world, and we'd like to share it with you.